Wonderful. Thank you all, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to call our regular meeting of our Town Plan and Zoning Commission to order. Today is Monday, June 7th at now 6:45-ish p.m. Again, apologies for the delay. My name is Rob Klee. I'm the chair of the Woodbridge Town Plan and Zoning Commission. Other members of the commission who are with us here tonight are Larry Greenberg, Yoni Zamir, Paul Schatz, Andrew Skolnick, and Jeff Kennedy. As always, we're ably supported by Chris Sullivan. Thank you for all your help in getting us prepared for our events. We are still operating our hearings remotely under the auspices of the governor's executive orders on the coronavirus. We thank you in advance, everyone, for your patience, which I already did when we encounter technical difficulties, as I did today. We have a busy agenda. It's been posted on the town website. We're going to start with a request for a one-year renewal of the special exception permit for excavation and other activities at the stadium field at Amity Regional High School. And then we'll have our work session where I'm going to take things a little out of order and we can discuss that request for the one-year renewal from Amity, and then spend the bulk of our work session on the 2 Orchard Road application for a zoning regulation amendment and amendment to our town plan of conservation and development. That will be our last work session, and we will make our decisions tonight. Then at the end, we'll wrap up as we do with a few reports and minutes and those sorts of things. So let's jump right in with the request for the one-year renewal. And I see there's a few folks here, I'm assuming on behalf of Amity.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicholas Bamonte. I am from the law firm of Bertram Moses. We're here on behalf of Amity Regional School District 5. And as you see in front of you, we're here requesting the one-year renewal under section 33N8C of your regulations, which allows for a one-year special exception renewal. As you will recall, this commission approved the special exception allowing for the reconstruction of the new stadium field back on July 13th of last year. We lost about the first 6 months due to a court appeal that was filed right after the approval. That appeal was withdrawn in January of this year. So as soon as that happened, we started moving forward with construction pursuant to the special exception. So at this point, things have been moving along quite efficiently. We are currently approximating a completion time of somewhere between July and August of this summer in time for fall sports. With me, or at least with me earlier on the call, I know he also had a couple technical difficulties, is Chris Hulk, the senior civil engineer with SLR. They've been working directly with the district and the contractor on the site. So pursuant to the requirements under your regulations for this kind of request, we have submitted a written report from Mr. Hulk, basically a one-page letter saying that the work thus far has been in compliance with the terms of the special exception. And in addition, you should have an updated grading plan from Mr. Hulk showing the state of the field or about what the state is at this point. So if you have any questions pertaining to the field itself, I think Mr. Hulk is probably best suited to answer those, and any other questions that I might be able to take, I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Attorney Bamonte. And I do see Mr. Hulk is here, and yep. And we can even hear you, which is an added bonus. So I'll open it up to our commission members to see if they have any questions regarding this request for the one-year extension.
How much longer is anticipated, Attorney Bamonte, for the completion of the project?
Not much. My understanding, like I said, is between July and August, probably closer to some point in August. We're hoping to have things finished. Chris, do you want to expand on that at all?
Sure. Yeah. The current construction schedule is set to be completed on August 13th. So that is, the track going down, the turf, all that kind of stuff will be done towards the end of July. And then they'll be buttoning up stuff, completing fencing, punch list items. So they're shooting for middle of August.
Great. Any additional questions from members of the TPZ? I see Paul Schatz may have one.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is, we're talking about, this is the permit for the excavation, correct? There's nothing to do with anything else.
That's correct.
The excavation that's already begun is some portion through, and we're just giving you time to complete. And if we did not extend the permit, then construction would halt and we'd have a big sloppy, muddy mess in our hands, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
We technically haven't, the expiration under your regs at least is a year from the approval. That approval was July 13th. So we technically have until July 13th.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
Thank you, Paul. Any further questions? I'm not seeing any from our commission members, so thank you, Attorney Bamonte, and thank you, Mr. Hulk, for your presentation. I believe that was our only item on the new business agenda, so we can move directly to our work session.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you don't mind, I'll take us out of order so we can address the Amity Regional School District's request for a one-year renewal. Actually, let me start over again. I will entertain a motion to approve Amity Regional School District's request for a one-year renewal of the special exception permit for excavation, removal, filling, grading, and processing related to the replacement of the stadium field at the high school pursuant to section 3.3N8C of our regulations. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
In a second. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion from members of the commission? Then I think this is a reasonable request to extend so they can finish the job. Anything else? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you both for joining us. And
thanks, everyone.
Finishing up.
Thank you. Good night.
Great. So next up on our agenda is the continuation and the last of our work sessions on the 2 Orchard Road application. So thank you all for being here, and as we are wrapping up a lengthy process, both through the public hearings and our deliberation process. And I wanted to start with just a thank you. I'll end with thank yous as well, but it has been a real yeoman's work by all the folks on the commission, and it is truly appreciated the time and attention you've put in. Also, a thank you to our attorney and Mr. Chalder for their support all along the way, and Chris Sullivan as usual. So again, this is our deliberation phase. We have not had any communications with each other. We have not had communications with the outside world, the public, etc. Through this process of our deliberations. We are coming to the end of our 65 days in which we were allowed to conduct these deliberations, and tonight is the night where we're going to render our decision. We've been digesting all of those materials that are on the record. The record is the thing that drives our decision-making process. We've talked about pieces of the record. We've presented them to one another during our deliberations, and those are the things that have been informing our activities for tonight. And I was wondering if I could share my screen, Chris, because I know I have the, we have some various documents. Thank you. So there are a few documents that we're going to get to that are the actual texts of amendments and the draft text of a motion. But before I do, I actually and Attorney Dubuque, you'll have to tell me if I did something I wasn't supposed to. I created, for me at least, a way to organize my thoughts, a sort of PowerPoint diagram of the things, the kind of choices that are before us. And I thought it would be helpful to actually have those at the high level before we're in the weeds of the motions before us. So it's just a single sheet of a PowerPoint that has all of us and kind of where we stand on our three big options. We can remember when we all started talking about this, we can deny the application in its entirety as it was filed. That's option one. We can approve the application in its entirety as it was originally filed. Or what we've been talking about for the most part is approving the Two Ocean Road application with reasonable modifications. And then, in the course of our discussions, I've called them options 1, 2, and 3, and the numbering system would get confused. I thought it'd be just easiest to see it on a piece of paper. So is this something, Attorney Dubuque, that I can just put up and share?
I just want to be clear, it doesn't reflect any of the comments of the various members or where they stand, right? Is it just a summary of what your options are at this point?
Well, no, but I want to actually then ask where everyone stands. I have filled in my row of where I stand. So it's like a straw poll on the main options. And to me, and I'll tell you before I share it, I do not think we should deny the application in its entirety, as filed. I also don't think we should approve it in its entirety as filed. And despite reasonable and repeated offers to do so, the applicant didn't actually want to do our normal sort of back and forth discussion process. So I'm in favor of approving the application with reasonable modifications. And to my view, there are 4 of them. Allowing accessory dwelling units in all districts by zoning permit, allowing 2-family and 2-family affordable in all districts by zoning permit or by special exception in the public watershed supply areas, and allowing approving a multifamily affordable in all residential districts with water and sewer by special exception. And then I have a 4th category that would have changes to our plan of conservation and development to reflect that we want to promote housing diversity and affordability in balance with other goals. So that's just my summary of what I think we last left off with in our discussions. And for me, I'm a visual sort of person, and I thought it'd be nice to have it in one handy place as we're going through our discussions.
So if it just reflects the information that was already in the record, and it sounds like it basically breaks down Mr. Chalder's framework in a sort of more clear way, then I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure that you only have your opinions there, because I don't think you should use it now to put anybody else's opinions in until they share them again tonight.
Correct. So, yeah, no, I would actually just walk through and have people fill in the blanks as I fill them in. I can delete my blanks now and fill them in as we go. I'm happy to do that.
No, you just said, I think, what your summary is going to reflect. So if you want to put it up, and I'll quickly eyeball it to everybody to turn away for a second. It sounds to me like it is fine. It's all information that was already in the record, because again, we're being very careful about making sure we confine all of the information that's considered to what was already in the record.
Yeah, no, and I understand that, and I do apologize. I sort of came up with this idea late this afternoon when my son's graduation was canceled or turned to a drive-by due to COVID, unfortunately. So, okay, so I will share. Let me see if I can share just this. Okay, are we seeing the shared screen, everyone?
So that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So for our commission members, and to sort of, because our goal is to hopefully get to decision as in a reasonable sort of time tonight. Let me just sort of walk you through my sort of row and then invite others to give their reactions sort of row by row. So as I said earlier, I'm not I don't believe we should deny their app. Remember, we only had 3 sort of options. They've presented us, the Open Communities Alliance, with their requests to modify our zoning regulations and modify our plan of conservation development. I'm not in favor of rejecting that entirely and just saying, no, go home. I'm also not in favor of improving their application in its entirety, but I do believe that it had a lot of merit, and it raised some issues, and it showed some areas where we needed improvements to our regulations in this regard about housing diversity and housing affordability. So I am no to approving it wholesale, but my little footnote is that I really wish they worked with us to come up with a collaborative process with changes and alternatives. We asked them repeatedly, they said no repeatedly, and I think that was a missed opportunity, frankly. So I'm taking this option, which is our legitimate sort of option to say, I will approve, I'm in favor of improving their application with reasonable modifications. And then the 4 columns to the right show those reasonable modifications that I believe really speak to what the applicants presented to us, but it speaks to them and then reacts to them in a way that, as many of the members of the public said to us, that you should come up with our own Woodbridge sort of approach. And to me, this is a Woodbridge approach that does speak to all the things that the applicants put in their application to us. And I'll sort of give my pitch for why. As you recall, the applicants wanted to change every residential zoning district to allow this opportunity affordable housing. So they wanted something that had the breadth of applying to the entire town across the board. In my view, that's achieved by this column on approving and sort of updating our accessory dwelling units in all residential districts by zoning permit. And again, so back to what they asked, they wanted this opportunity housing in every residential district in town by zoning permit only. So I think this checks the box as it's all across town and it is by zoning permit only. In the second column, again, I think that this is a reasonable accommodation that increases the amount of housing diversity and affordability in every district in town, in every residential district. I would be in favor. I'm a yes for approving 2-family and 2-family affordable opportunities in all residential districts. And for the majority of those districts by zoning permit only, which again is reflective of what the applicants put in, but in recognition of the advice of our expert, Mr. Chalder, and our attorney, that in those public water supply watershed areas, having some level of triggering some level of review, because that brings in those other processes and makes sure that we're all on the same page with the public health and the water district. So in general, though, this is another, yes, we will have increased housing diversity and affordability everywhere in town. My third column is approving multifamily, so more than 2, so in the 3 and above, multifamily affordable housing in all residential districts that are served by water and sewer, and this one with a special exception. So this does reflect the considerable conversations that we had about the challenges of being in a town with well water and septic systems, and that type of more dense development, more than 2 family development, for now is best suited in the places where we had water and sewer. And then the last column, because we always seem to forget about the plan of conservation development, I want to make sure on this one page that we didn't forget about it. This is, again, it is changes to our plan of conservation development that reflect this new direction for us, that we are going to include language that demonstrates that we want to have housing diversity. It demonstrates that we want to have affordable housing, but it also demonstrates that we're seeking to draw that balance that our council and our expert, Mr. Chalder, talked about, that those goals are laudable goals for us to achieve that can be balanced with our concerns over public health and safety and water quality and the like. So that's my sort of pitch to the group of why I believe that the approving their application with these reasonable modifications that speak to their original application, that resonate with their original application, is what I think is my proposal of what we should go forward with today. And after this, we can talk about the details, in that is required to approve that. I do have a logistic question. I'm going to pause there. Attorney Dubuque, do I need to do anything formally for Jeff or no?
Yes, because I don't think there was ever a formal vote. I don't think there was ever, not a formal vote, a formal designation for him to fill the seat that was left vacant by Kathleen Wallace. And because you're now starting to go down the path of a decision, I think for the record, you should proceed with formally seating him and having him affirm that he's been a part of every single meeting. And
I thought we did that when we started our deliberations. And maybe it's so long ago, I'm not remembering.
Just in case, because I don't believe it was reflected in the minutes, and I may have forgotten to mention it earlier.
Well, let's do it now. I'll entertain a motion to formally seat.
No, that's your designation. No, you, only you.
Jeff Kennedy, you are formally seated for these deliberations and to fill the seat of Kathleen Wallace. Can you affirm that you have been an active participant in these proceedings and these deliberations, please?
Yes.
Okay. Is that good? Okay, we're formal.
Will there be a party to celebrate this Jeff's ascension?
Oh, I don't know. It's just for this one proceeding, isn't it?
It's a temporary ascension.
Yeah, I'd have to do it every time, and then we'd have to have a party every time, which I think would be a little much. Okay. Yoni, would you like to go next in reaction to the sort of table I have up on the screen? And I'm happy to fill in the blanks as we go.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit tricky for me because I appreciate the framework that you've laid out, or the PowerPoint the way that you laid it out, nice and simply. I think I've made it very clear, and I'll state it for the record again today, that I think it is permissible and that we should, as a commission, go ahead and approve changing the size of the accessory dwelling unit. I think that is within the purview. I disagree with my colleague, Attorney Dubuque, my colleague at the law. I appreciate her tireless service to us, but I disagree with her that that is not within the purview. I realize this is her subject matter expertise. So it's difficult for me to say yes or no in each of your columns, right? So I would not approve the application in its entirety as originally filed, nor would I deny it. Instead, the reasonable modifications that I would, that I would want to see go further than what we're talking about here, specifically that we would allow larger, we would, modify to allow for larger ADUs immediately across all zones. By zoning permit is fine, but we would increase the size of our ADUs from a maximum of 600 immediately. I would say that approving two-family, and by the way, I think that I don't think I could say enough. I've said enough, but I don't think I could say enough about how much of a difference that would that would already make for improving access to housing for marginalized communities, many of which I work with every day. Approving two-family and two-family affordable in all residential districts by zoning permit, that column I agree with. As for special exception in public watershed and water supply areas, I disagree with that aspect of it. I think we should allow it by zoning permit across all districts. In our zoning permit could include the requirement that, you know, the septic system be sufficient and that it's passed all reasonable requirements by the Department of Public Health, as well as the Regional Water Authority, et cetera, as we've discussed ad nauseum in these hearings. I think that could be done now. I do think that we have, as a community, to make efforts towards improving our water and sewer access across these communities. I think that we could make a concerted effort as citizens, as voters, and to pressure the state to increase some of the access to water and sewer. But that said, I was fairly convinced that a family of say a three-family house with, you know, that's comparable from all the measures that we've discussed, you know, the amount of coverage of a plot of land, the amount of impervious coverage, et cetera. I was fairly convinced from the testimony of the consultants that were brought before us that, in fact, we could allow for that. So I would have to say that I would go further in that column and I would not require a special exception. And yeah, as to the POCD, sure, yeah, you can make me down as a yes.
And Yoni, just for the accessory dwelling units, do you see what I'm doing in sort of, you know, footnoting?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Should that be a yes with the two? With that, but you would go further.
Yeah. And I would, what was it? Oh, on ADUs that I would, yeah. I mean, obviously I prove it now, but I would leave that as a yes, but with the, I would immediately increase as part of our reasonable changes, reasonable modifications. I would increase the ADU maximum size immediately.
Okay. Thank you, Yoni. Does this get close to reflecting? And I do appreciate your, you are a yes, but would go more on many of those modifications.
Yes, that's a
okay.
simple way to say it.
Larry, would you like to go next?
First, I want to thank everybody that's participated in the proceedings over the last 6 or 7 months. They've been very informative presentations, very well thought presentations. I too would agree that in the first two columns that I would vote no. I would approve the Orchard Road application with reasonable modifications. I agree with approving the accessory dwelling units in all residential districts by permit. I strongly feel that there should be two-family affordable in all residential districts. I think it's equitable. I think it's reasonable. And I think it will assist greatly in the diversity of housing opportunities that we have in town. I would continue with the special exception in the public water supply areas. Multifamily in areas that are served by water and sewer, I would say yes to that with continuing with the special exception. And I easily agree to the changes in the POCD.
Great, thank you very much, Larry. Next up, Andrew, would you like to go?
So just in general, I agree that there's a clear statutory obligation to make changes. And along that theme, I agree. In the first column, no, it shouldn't be denied in its entirety. In the second column, no, it shouldn't be approved in its entirety. Yes, in the third column, with reasonable modifications. Yes, with respect to accessory dwelling units. With regard to two-family houses, I've already expressed my hesitancy with respect to that. I think at the very least, I would want a site plan review before I would vote in favor of that column in all districts, rather than just by zoning permit, which would afford the commission the opportunity to review each and every application, even if it didn't involve a public hearing. With respect to the second to last column, I am a yes for that, as I've previously expressed. And I am a yes for making the corresponding changes to the plan of conservation and development.
Thank you, Andrew. And I put a 4 asterisks in that column. I'm going to run out of asterisks at some point to reflect that you're not a yes or a no yet, but you've presented a new idea that might get you to yes.
It's a conditional compromise. Conditional. And also I assume that when we get to the second to last column, for example, there are still some details to be ironed out in terms of parking and the like. I have an idea in that category with respect to a potential answer to that, but we've not gotten there yet. Am I right, Commissioner? Chairman?
Yes, we haven't gotten there yet. No, and I do appreciate that. That's in the details. I just wanted to get the sort of high level sort of straw poll of where we were, and I do appreciate folks who can come up with sort of creative thoughts on those last few pieces. So thank you, Andrew. Jeff, would you like to go next? Oh, I think you're muted, Jeff. Sorry.
Thank you. So I'll say that many of my colleagues already articulately spoke for me. So I'm going to let many of those comments stand, which I mostly agree with. So this won't be too hard for you, Mr. Chairman. No, no, yes. And I'll give you a chance to catch up with your typing. And accessory dwelling units, yes. From the start, I've been most hesitant about approving the two-family and two-family affordable in all residential areas, absent a wider look at that issue by the town leadership, and various committees established. However, I do find Mr. Skolnick's 4 asterisk idea of a site plan review possibly persuadable. So I'm going to go with maybe. I want to hear more about that. And then yes and yes.
Thank you, Jeff. And you were right. I was struggling to type as fast as you were going.
It's okay. No, I just want to get this done right.
Appreciate it. And so thank you, Jeff. Batting cleanup, Paul, you'd like to go ahead.
Well, technically, it's not batting cleanup, it's batting sixth. Andy would be the cleanup batter, which is probably where he belongs. And I belong down the pecking order. So I just want to, first, I want to begin and echo what a couple people have said already. Rob, I thank you for your leadership because it's really been strong. And this has been a tough, I think it's seven months since we began this. And I think the commission has behaved beyond appropriately and respectfully during the process. So thank you. And our legal counsel, as well as our professional staff, definitely should be commended for helping us along the way. And it has not been an easy 7 months, but we've certainly put together a process that's been followed. And thankfully, it will conclude tonight. And regardless of what the vote is, everyone, I think, should be proud of how we got to this point. And whether anyone agrees or disagrees, you always support the decision of the majority. So with that, I will say, my objections to not what you've done, Rob, but to the questions are that my own feeling is that I think the public should have another opportunity at this because I don't think enough people will end up understanding what happened. And I fully respect your pushback, Rob, at the last meeting. Never a worry to have positive, constructive discourse. So in the first column, I would say no. In the second column, I would say no. In the third column, I would say yes. And then from there, I'm going to give you my comments, and then you don't need to asterisk, but I would not approve 1, 2, 3, 4. I would not approve 5 or 6. And I obviously and enthusiastically would approve the final column. And let me just say, I do think, even though I'm not a big regulation guy, I would rather see the playing field leveled and having either special exceptions or site plans for all residential units in town rather than pick and choose. I would not ever support just zoning permit across the board. So absence that, I'd personally rather see either special exception or a site plan, however we get to that point.
And Paul, I apologize if I didn't quite get, you started referring to column numbers.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the approve accessory dwelling units and the 2 over, I'm a no.
So a no on AD.
Yep.
Okay.
And then a no to the right and a no to the right.
Okay, Paul, but I guess I have to, you do want to approve with reasonable modifications, but these were 3 of the modifications on the table. Did you have others that you would have?
No, so I may have a different view, Rob, if we had this with the public involved again. That's my issue. So I probably don't fit perfectly into your buckets as diagram, but I do think there should be reasonable modifications. But I just don't support the 3 columns to the right without having the public more involved. I think the average town resident, if this passes, is going to, and again, I'm part of but I think we've done an amazing job getting to this point. I just don't think the average person in town is aware of what's going on. And I think there'll be enough anger and disappointment when if the decision is reached as the grid stands as is.
Okay, I think I understand that. Although I'd probably turn to our attorney, I'm not sure how we would reflect that in in a vote, because we're going to sort of drill into each of the topics.
Right, that's fine. And when you ask for a hands up or down, I will certainly vote yay or nay. But I don't think it has to. It's not going to be accurately reflected in the spreadsheet PowerPoint in front of me.
Okay,
it's okay. It didn't have to be.
And that's fair, because this was meant as a sort of straw poll to get things in one place. And so I do really appreciate that. This is definitely helpful to me to understand. I guess the place that I'm, I guess, most interested in going to next is for Andrew and Jeff on the two-family and two-family affordable in all residential districts by zoning permit or by special exception. You were interested in having site plan review. Can you speak a little bit more to that, and was that everywhere site plan review for all two families?
It would be everywhere site plan review except in those areas serviced by or accessible at the builder's option to sewer and water. So as to the two family houses, yes.
So if there were,
it kind of dovetails into my and the reason I would want at least site plan review. I think one of the major concerns that we heard was the prospect with respect to a multifamily dwelling of a yard filled with 6 or 8 cars. And my suggestion was going to be with respect to the multifamily dwellings, and it could as easily be applied to two-family dwellings, that there be a minimum garage requirement, wherein the number of bays should at least equal, at a minimum, the number of dwelling units in a particular structure. And that would take the cars, at least most of them, out off the lawn or out of the driveway. That's my view on
that. Interesting. Do we, and I don't know our regulations, we currently don't have any minimum number of garages. I don't think we do.
But nor do we currently allow multifamily dwellings either. So.
True. No, I was more curious if there was existing language that could be, adopted. But before we get there, though, I wanted to make sure I understood, if you are a two-family in an area served by water and sewer,
then I would not have a problem with it simply being by zoning permit.
Okay.
If it's with respect to well and septic, I would want at least a site plan review.
Do we have any two-family? We have at least one that I can think of in this town already. Chris, any?
There are a few down.
You have many two families that are down in existing zones which have allowed them, which is residential C and residential D. You also have some two families in residential A, many of which updated the zoning regulations and actually were recognized through the Zoning Board of Appeals to be able to maintain that two-family status. So there are a number in residential A that were allowed by the Zoning Board of Appeals, mainly back in the 40s. And as I say, also in residential C and residential D. I don't have an exact number, but they are there.
In the time that you've lived or that you've been involved with our town, Chris, and in either in the position that you're in now or whatever previous positions you may have had in the office that you're working in, are you familiar with any complaints regarding just generally any complaints from neighbors of any of those in Zone A regarding sewer or any problems? Just curious from a historical perspective, if you recall of anything.
There failures of septic systems don't come through me, or they go straight to the Quinnipiac Valley Health District.
Right.
So I can't tell you that I've heard of any complaints in that area. I can tell you that in residential C and D, we have had concerns raised about parking and the availability of parking for two-family houses. The streets are fairly narrow, and people would complain that people were parking out in the road rather than on the property itself.
Sure. Thank you.
Welcome.
So, Andrew, I guess my last question, just so I know, so would there be still 3 flavors? What about in a public water supply watershed area? Would that be site plan or special exception? Still just focusing on the two-family.
That would be special exception, same as
currently written on the screen.
Yep.
Okay, so now I think I get it. So if you're if you want a two-family or two-family affordable and you're in water and sewer, that could be just by zoning a permit. If you're otherwise a site plan review, but if you're in the watershed area, special exception. So in essence, it'd be that
is an accurate representation of my position. Yes.
Interesting. Jeff, do you have you also get the 4 asterisks. So
yeah. No, I would go along with that as well.
I also like Andrew's idea about garage bays. I think he said per dwelling or per unit. And I think that's something that that's one objection I think the public would have as well, and that overcomes an objection before it's raised. So I think that's a good idea.
Let me just check with our attorney and our consultant, Mr. Chalder. I assume under 8.2 that parking and sort of traffic sort of concerns are within the list of things that are being balanced.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps I could start. Yes, but remember, you were presented with an application with certain types of changes. The notices were sent out with those types of changes, and you have this opportunity for reasonable changes to what the applicant proposed. The applicant didn't propose anything about garages, so I'm going to recommend that you not take any action with respect to garages. And remember, you can set, I've mentioned this before, an effective date that's, let's say 90 days out, perhaps more, if you wish. And in the meantime, on your own motion, you can enact anything you wish to enact, following the process of just holding a public hearing, and then you have your decision. So perhaps I'm being a little conservative here, but again, I'm trying to protect the integrity of a decision that you've spent months and months evaluating. So I'm trying to make sure that there are not any reasons for anyone to argue that perhaps you've exceeded the scope of reasonable changes. which is the rationale for what I'm recommending.
So, Attorney Buke, I appreciate that perspective, and again, these are shades of interpretation. They definitely raised parking in their application, and to me, it's not a far leap to go from reasonable parking requirements and parking rules to the garage is a place in which parking happens and occurs. So it also, their application was entirely about making sure that their application sought to have a house that had the same look as the rest of the sort of houses in their setbacks and roof lines, and so we're doing a lot of things in the body of the house. I don't know. I don't see that it's too far, though. I am, although, curious for Mr. Chalder, do other towns have these types of requirements on actuals or numbers of garage bays?
Chairman, the only thing I'm familiar with from other towns, they occasionally have limitations on the maximum number of garages, typically related to the number of bedrooms in a house.
You're a little faint there. I don't know if you can move your mic a little closer.
No, I got papers. I may have papers on my microphone or maybe my headset. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So just repeating, Mr. Chairman, some communities have limitations on the number of garages and they relate it to the number of bedrooms. And that's so, you don't end up with a 16-car garage on a 3-bedroom house type of scenario. But other than that, I'm not familiar with situations in terms of a minimum number of garages associated with residential units. There are some cases in multifamily developments where they might provide a bonus for garage type units, but again, it's not particularly common for that type of situation.
We are in a multifamily situation, and one might interpret this as a part of having this opportunity to do a 2-family development. Flipping the term bonus, I think, a little sideways, but interesting. Other reactions from?
Can I ask? Yeah, can I ask? Do we currently regulate? So our current zoning regulations, to my knowledge, don't require that for any of the single family homes, right? There's no requirement. Single family home, however large it is, just off the top of my head, just driving through Woodbridge, I can think of a number of homes where I've seen multiple cars parked outside, and I don't know that we regulate that at all. I'm sure Chris receives occasional complaints about the way people park, no doubt, but I don't know that we do regulate that at all for single family homes. Is that right?
If the question is, do we require garages? We do not.
No, I think, Chris, the question is, do we have limitations on the number of vehicles that could be parked in front of a house? In the commercial zones we do, but I don't.
No, we do not.
Not in residential. We don't have you can't have 5 cars parked in my driveway type of rules.
Right.
I don't know. The sniff doesn't pass the sniff test for me. I think it's veering into territory that becomes problematic to even consider in this day and age.
Yoni, I missed something. Are you not on board with requiring, let's say, a 2-family house to have 2 garage bays? Is that what you're not on board with?
No, I think yeah, that's what's being right. If I'm understanding Commissioner Skolnick's suggestion, it's that 2-family and 2-family affordable require, right? That's what the asterisks are representing that we're discussing here, that we're going to require as part of the special exception, or that whatever it is he's proposing, that it would also require a minimum number of The number of bays must be greater than or equal to the number of dwelling units in the structure, if I heard him correctly. And I don't think that we require that for single family homes, right? So I don't see how we could require that for a 2-family home. That seems.
Would you entertain if we did change it at a subsequent time to the same rule?
I think if we're going to change it for them for a 2-family, we should change it for all zones.
That's what I'm saying. If we change it for
At
everybody,
the same time, change it for everybody right now. Yeah, force everyone to build a garage. Don't grandfather anybody in. No. I think it's ridiculous, Paul. I think it's a ridiculous suggestion. I would never.
regardless.
Regardless.
So, okay.
No offense to Andrew. I just don't. I don't. No, I think the history of just finding ways to discriminate against people comes along with it. The car and how you can regulate the car and how you can regulate what number of cars they can park there. I like I said, I've driven through Woodbridge enough times to see plenty of large single family homes with an inordinate number of cars parked in front of them. And I think if we were going to start regulating that for 2-family, that would just be our way of saying, get out and don't even come near Woodbridge with your 2-family home. That's what I think we'd be saying. And I think a 2-family home, approving the ability to allow for the development of 2-family homes is a small but very important step in the direction of changing the long-standing discrimination in terms of housing and zoning that has gone on across the state and in sadly in Woodbridge too.
So am I muted? No. There's it also creates in some ways, some pragmatic challenges in dictating the sort of development amount and style. And I'm actually more in favor of some of the trends to eliminate parking requirements and minimum parking requirements, which, that happens a little more in the commercial side, but it often is a cost driver when you're, in essence, adding on those additional parking requirements. You're making it more expensive to build anything, and more expensive to build means less things get built. So I don't think I'm in favor of a minimum number of garage bays or units sort of add on. I am, though, willing to compromise on the zoning permit where there's water and sewer, site plan review where there isn't, and special exception in public water supply watershed areas. I think that would be a reasonable getting to yes sort of step for what I believe is a real important piece of this puzzle of having this 2-family and 2-family affordable be part of this package.
Sorry, what was your compromise, Rob? I'm sorry,
not on the garage.
Have these meetings at the commission at the town.
So not on the. I'm not a fan of the minimum number of garage bays, as frankly, just causing additional expense and complication. And I'm a less parking requirements instead of more parking requirements type of view. But I think if we can get to yes on having 2-family and 2-family affordable with this potential for site plan review in the places where it's not water and sewer, I'd be okay with that as a compromise. If it brought on Jeff or Andrew or both. Larry, I don't know if you have a view on.
I agree wholeheartedly that we should have no requirement or garage bays. As Yanni said, you can drive across this town and you can see 4, 5, 6 cars in driveways, and it would be an unreasonable requirement to impose that. With respect to site plan approval, I could be convinced that if other people came aboard to go in that direction. And with respect to Paul's comment about, that townspeople may want to have added input, they've had 6 or 7 months. We've had a pretty good array of comments that have been made to the commission. And by pushing this vote off, I think we would be abdicating our responsibility as commissioners to make the decision.
I would want to piggyback on that, Mr. Chairman, that if you examine the history of not just our town, but towns across this state and nation, where you open up proposals after lengthy consideration by people who were delegated by the town to sit on a commission and to consider changes, and then you have public hearings on changes or proposed changes, as we had in our experience here. Proposed changes are and open hearings to allow public comment are essential, but to allow for public comment and public input on every proposed 2-family house across this town, I think will bring out a contingent of our neighbors who, for whatever reason, are simply against any change whatsoever that changes this town from the way it looked during the Eisenhower administration, as we've seen in other arenas. And I think it's regrettable that we would even consider allowing the small contingent of naysayers to have a veto power, as they have already had on many much forward progress in this town. So that said, if it's the only way to get to yes on something here, then it's the only way to get to yes. And I recognize that I'm part of a commission, that I'm not, but that's my view.
And the only thing I would add, Yoni, is that site plan review is not a public hearing requirement. It's just, it has to come in front of us. And these are the types of things that we can, after seeing a few of them, we can also revisit and see what they look like.
Certainly.
So Jeff and Andrew, does that a sort of a middle ground that you'd be willing to vote yes on for the 2-family and 2-family affordable, by zoning permit where there's water and sewer, by site plan where there isn't, and by special exception in the public water supply watershed areas?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, great. Should I change this here, or should we just move to? I'm happy to do either. Should we move now to the actual text that we need to look at?
I think it's irrelevant whether you change your top row.
I guess only to
except if there's any lack of recollection as to what was agreed to.
So, Attorney Dubuque, is this going to end up going in the record? Is I guess the question. Or as a document associated with our deliberations, what that means. Or is it just a assistance device that we're using just so we can look at something and not each other while we're talking?
Well, that's actually an interesting question, because I have to say I've never seen an assistance device in my 37 years. So I haven't seen any case law on whether this would be required to be included in the record. I don't see that it would harm the record in any way. I mean, it's just normally there's some, the deliberations are part of the process, but.
And certainly the discussions themselves are being recorded and both video and audibly.
Right, but I think it's fine to just leave it as is. It was just a discussion piece.
Okay. Then I will save it and close it. Because I think we've now gotten to probably enough yeses to go into the Attorney Dubuque and Mr. Schaller. Should we then go into the documents that have the actual language, unless there's any objection of the other commission members?
No objection.
Okay, so I will save that. Should I still keep sharing my screen? Is that easier? Unless, will we have to make some changes? I have the documents in PDFs, which I can change, but here, let me bring them up. And tell me if you can. Are they showing up in your window now?
Yes.
So at least that part of my tech is working. My kid's not there unplugging this part. It's the mischievous younger one who did it.
Mhm.
Okay, so these are in the regulations first. So I think, and so this is why this was actually so helpful. I'll go back to this for a moment. We were had a considerable number of yeses, but we'll do a formal vote, Attorney Dubuque, on the accessory dwelling unit. Should we start there? Or where's easiest to start?
I think you might want to start by just going through the text on each page, because that's probably the best way to make sure everybody's on the same page, technically.
Okay, before I do,
then the vote comes afterwards. Everybody's all sure where you're going.
Okay. Do anyone need a 5-minute break before we do that? I saw at least one hand go up. So let's return at 8 o'clock and we'll start doing the page turn by turn. Thank you, everyone. I only have a whatchamacallit, a PDF version, which are a little harder to edit. So I don't know, Mr. Chalder, do you have a Word version? Is that something that you could share? And if we need to make some line edits as we go to reflect our discussion we just had, maybe that would be easier.
I think I can, Mr. Chairman. Bear with me just for a moment. Chris, would you allow me to share screen?
And I'll stop sharing.
Oh, there we go.
And if you could make it a little wider and larger so our eyes can see.
That okay, Mr. Chairman?
It looks good to me. I think, did anyone have any comments or thoughts on the, so let me pause. Attorney Dubuque, should I just ask if anyone had comments or questions on page 1, or do you want me to go section by section? What's the best way to do this?
I would say page by page might be efficient.
Okay. Did anyone have any comments or edits on page 1, which covers the opportunity housing and its purpose?
I don't have any problem with anything on page 1.
Anyone else? Hearing none, I think we're good on page 1. Let's go to page 2, where we're going into definitions. Anyone have any comments or edits on page 2, which has a number of definitions? Oh, thank you for removing those.
I'm sorry, I know that I use that, but others do not.
Yeah, and I don't think any of it,
No problem with page 2 either.
nor do I. Does anyone else? And I don't think any of our changes or edits impacted page 2.
No.
Okay, let's move to page 3.
Mr. Chairman, while the commission was talking on page 3, I tried to capture what I think the commission was saying here by modifying this table 3.4D to make one line, 2-family, including 2-family with 1 unit deed restricted at 60% of median income served by public water and sewer. I believe the commission indicated zoning permit with a special permit in a public water supply watershed. And then the second line becomes when not served by public water and public sewer. The applicant's original submittal had been zoning permit, and based on the commission's conversation this evening, I believe the symbol used in your current zoning regulations is S for site plan approval. And I believe the commission was indicating in these situations that those would be S. Public water and public sewer is essentially available in the T3D and the T3D, so this is really of little effect. But again, this is what the commission had stated.
That's consistent with what I understood to have been the discussion and agreement.
And I believe it's consistent with the discussion as well. It's highlighted in yellow. Anyone else have other comments? So hearing none, that change looks good. At the bottom of the page, any other comments on any other parts of this page which were not modified? Right, hearing none, I think we should move on to page 4. And page 4 contains a area for discussion on the maximum density in units per acre for multifamily opportunity housing in the A zone, with the original at 15 units per acre and then 3 alternatives. So I'm still in favor of the original 15 units per acre for consistency across all of our houses, or all of our residential districts. But no, but Mr. Shaw, those are still up for discussion.
Understood. Thank you.
Were there any other folks wanted to discuss those?
I think I'll just reiterate what I said last time, that I thought 15 units, as you described, of those, I forgot what you referred to them as on Lucy Street. I thought that was too dense.
I hear you, Paul, but these again are places that have water and sewer, so they can handle density. Other comments, thoughts, reactions?
just to give me a minute. I'm trying to understand what all these numbers mean. It's gonna take me a minute. Both regulations are difficult for me.
Can you remind me once again, Mr. Chalder, why we talked about a possible alternative in a zone for 10 and 5 respectively? Remind me what that, because I remember that I was looking at the draft from May 21st. We had that discussion about how the 0.7 was an alternate based on current maximum theoretical density. The 0.7 worked out to 1 unit per 1.5 acres, or 0.7 units per acre. So here in this one, you've got a 10 as a possible alternate, and a 5. Just could you walk me through that, please?
Yeah, I think there was discussion at the meeting on May 24th with regard to alternate densities in the A district. It was an unresolved issue at that time in terms of what that might have been. Because the Chairman Klee indicated the commission's guidance at that time had been 15 across the board, but they might want to consider some alternates, and as a result, these lines were placed in this table for possible discussion on the part of the commission.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on board with the 15.
Should I leave these lines in, Mr. Chairman, or delete them?
No, so I'd like to count our votes on the 15 number. Attorney Dubuque, do we need to sort of formally do I need a motion?
Just so I'm clear, when as A is represented in this schematic, A represents A with city water and sewer?
Correct. Yes, these are the. Yes.
And the far column is all the rest in the watershed? Or is it everything, even if it's not in the watershed, but doesn't have water and sewer?
I think, Mr. Chalder, you should correct me if I'm wrong. That Venn diagram didn't sort of fall into place where there's any part of the watershed that also has water and sewer.
I believe that's correct, Mr. Chairman. I can grab that map if you'd like me to.
Yeah, so Andrew, I think it's just because the public water supply watershed areas as mapped do not have any places with water or sewer. So that raises a question: if the waters and sewers were extended into that area, would you're in an A with water and sewer, would that apply, or?
I think
Review of the map, I agree that any area that has both water and sewer is not in the watershed, in the public water supply watershed. There are areas of public water service that are clearly within the public in the watershed, but not with both.
And Mr. Chalder, I guess my question is if water and sewer were extended into some portion of the A zone in the public water supply watershed area, these building density, it would be treated like other places with water and sewer, correct? Which are also, we're doing this all by a special exception anyway, so it would be within, it would be with consultation with the water district, et cetera.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, I think the extension of utilities in a public water supply watershed is something that the State Plan of Conservation and Development has guidelines and provisions for. And I think it actually opens a little bit of a Pandora's box worth of issues that perhaps might be an issue the commission would address at that time. If that circumstance arises, you would perhaps revisit the regulation and decide what you felt was the most appropriate approach.
Okay.
Chairman, I realized that this acronym here should be Public Water Supply Watershed, so I'm just going to go ahead and make that change. I apologize.
Yeah, but I don't think it's PWWS.
Oh, thank you. Public Water Supply. Between the two of us typing, we'll eventually get it, Mr. Chairman.
So back to Andrew or others. Should we see, or I guess Attorney Dubuque, do we need to have a formal motion on this question of whether there's support for 15 units per acre in the A zone?
No, I think what you're trying to do is just figure out where you have the consensus of the commission,
Okay.
and then you'll have a vote on
Everything all at once. Okay.
Yes, I think so.
For a straw poll, I am in favor of 15 units per acre in the A zone where there is water and sewer. Yoni, your position on that?
Concur.
Andrew?
10.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
10.
10. Thank you. Jeff?
I would prefer 10, but I'm okay with 15.
And Larry?
I would agree with 15.
And Paul?
10.
I'm not counting very well. So I think with
it was
Jeff,
3-2.
well, there's 6 of us.
Oh.
I think it's
Yoni.
40.
You didn't get Yoni.
Yeah, I did. He was a yes. So I think it's
That's 4-2.
I think it's 4-2 or 15 because Jeff could go either way. So I'm going to take Jeff as a 15.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to keep it at the 15. Thank you all. And Mr. Schaller, you can delete those other alternatives. Anything else on this page?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question since I would be enforcing this.
Yep.
Is Mr. Chalder's last thing just on public water supply watersheds, or is it A, where there is no public water and sewer?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Chris, on the previous page, item E1B says any multifamily opportunity housing development proposed under this section 3.4E shall be served by public water and sewer.
Okay, then that answers the question. I couldn't see that on the next page.
Yep, that's why I wanted to go back. Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you both. Anything further on this page, which I don't see the page number, but
4.
4. Hearing none, seeing none. Let's go to page 5, which covers the affordability requirements. And I'll just sort of comment that I think this is where I think, took in all the input from a bunch of sources and tried to come up with a way to approach affordability. I think a lot of this sort of next pages sort of clarified that in the rules of Or are we not there yet? I apologize. Yeah, I should stop with the commentary and just ask any questions on page 5 or edits. I have none.
I'm fine with the way it's already edited.
Great. Any other questions or edits on page 5? Hearing none, let's go to page 6. Any other edits or changes? I think page 6.
I just meant to ask 5B, what does more than one plane mean, Mr. Chalder? I missed that in the last.
That was language submitted by OCA, by the applicant. I think generally a plane is a planar surface. It's a rectangle of one dimension flatness. This would indicate that you would have to have a jog in the building of some type to create a second plane. Could be perpendicular. It could be, at a different angle, but it would have some horizontal or vertical differentiation in the wall.
Okay.
So it just wouldn't be one big rectangle.
Yeah, one flat wall. The applicants proposed this language. I think it's most designers that would understand what that meant, Mr. Chairman.
Right. No, it's a good question though. Any other questions or comments on page 6? I think it otherwise looks good. Hearing none, we can move to page 7. Any comments or edits on page 7? Again, I think this are some reasonable edits to what was proposed by the applicant. So I'm in favor. Any other comments? Hearing none. Page 8 on the affordability plan requirements. This is the part I was remembering. Any comments on page 8? Edits, questions? Hearing none, we can go on to page 9 for the affirmative fair housing marketing plan requirement. And also filing of documents.
Section J, limitation on variance. I see we got rid of number 2. So just understanding number 1, right? As provided, CGSH6, use permitted by this section 2.4 shall not be permitted by variance in districts in which such uses are not otherwise allowed. So that means that the commission cannot otherwise grant a variance for opportunity to allow for opportunity housing in any other district where it's not otherwise allowed. As I recall, in the last discussion, we had some kind of I made a note about a point that you raised, Mr. Chairman, about the mixed use districts. So did we ever address that issue? Remember on page 1, going back to page 1, I don't know, this just kind of like reminded me of that. I have a note here that says, add these opportunities regarding allowed multiple unit structures must comply with all bulk dimensional requirements for the proposed development as specified in section 3.4, and developments with 3 or more units must include affordable housing as specified in section 3.4 of this regulation. And you had said something about adding this to where we have mixed use districts to allow for 3 more units. Did we do that? Did that ever get addressed? Because then I'm reading this limitation on variance, and I'm wondering, in a mixed use district, right? Do we allow, I guess the question is, are we gonna, is opportunity housing allowed in the mixed use district?
So, Yoni, it's a great question. Before we get to it, I want to just make sure I'm clear. This is saying that the Zoning Board of Appeals could not, by variance, take what we did and put it into the mixed use district. Is that the right way to read this provision, either Attorney Dubuque or Mr. Chalder?
I believe it is. I believe it is, Mr. Chairman.
Because we don't do variances.
Right, it's the ZBA's jurisdiction for variances.
So, Yoni, to your question,
What is the present mixed use district, by the way?
so it's like one of the one of the very few that we didn't cover.
It's in the general business district, and it's basically an overlay zone, and it becomes a smaller part of the general business district. You discussed this at the last meeting, and I believe, but Attorney Dubuque can correct me if I'm wrong, that since this was not raised as part of the application, that this was something that you could address at some other point individually as a commission.
Okay, yeah.
Correct.
So
Somebody was listening.
So Yoni, to my mind, that would be not that any of this is easy, but a relatively easy fix of our own accord, perhaps even before the effective date of this going into place, would be in essence to just add whatever mixed use districts that were not part of the applicant's ask, because they only asked for residential only districts, to just add a couple of more, just see those, add them in. Just like we could also do some changes to the accessory dwelling units and their bulk, dimension and requirements in a nice, sort of neat and tidy new public hearing, not 9 months or 6 months or 7 months, but something we could do in a pretty straightforward manner. But to be very sort of conservative, not reaching out to do this in those mixed use districts in this proceeding because the applicants did not ask for those districts.
Right, understood.
Any other?
Rob, can I go back? I've got a question. Let me go to my PDF. So can operationally on page 8, so I think there was something in here about annual reports to the commission. So operationally, is that just that the developer or the property owner gives some piece of paper to the commission and as a submission, and that suffices? Is that how it works? Is that what the intent was?
And sure, you're looking at F1A in one of the bullets.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chalder, can you sort of tell us how this is normally done?
Yep. So this section of the regulations requires that a housing affordability plan be submitted by the applicant. That plan has to designate several things, one of which is the person, entity, or agency that's qualified, experienced, and capable of administering the housing affordability plan. And that those functions would include qualifying potential purchasers or tenants and verifying the maximum sales price or rental rate. And then the annual report to the commission would be proposed in the housing affordability plan, indicating that yes, all units that are rented, on all units that were sold in the past year, qualified on the basis of rental rate, sale price, and eligible incomes.
And we would get that, we would have a fixed date within that plan. Every August, the person comes in and with a report and a presentation to us.
Or some communities do it for any development that occur. All developments would report on January 15th or something. So just to make, again, the administration simpler or whatever the commission felt was appropriate.
Okay. And we would figure out those details through that development of the plan.
I think at some point in time, the commission may want to evaluate a consistent or standard housing affordability plan because if the language is diverse, it can become challenging to monitor. So I know at least one community in Connecticut has a standard housing affordability plan, and Woodbridge may want to consider something similar.
So then every January 15th, the developer/property owners submit the plan to the commission, and there's no discussion or vote. It's just a submission as an annual requirement.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
The housing affordability plan, Commissioner Schatz, could be a 20-page document. The annual report could be a 1-page that all tenants at the address of the development complied, all transactions complied. It's a compliance report. I think the only action the commission might take in this situation is if it turned out for some reason that something happened that wasn't in compliance with either state statutes or the affordability plan, that would now be an area that would require additional investigation.
And is there any consequences for not submitting these reports?
So it's an interesting question. If you're, I mean, it'd be in violation of their approved development. We can, well, that's maybe that's a question for our attorney. You know, granted, these are all sort of hypotheticals, but Attorney Dubuque, we would have some ability to bring them in front of us and some enforcement ability, right?
Correct. And you'd have the opportunity certainly to discuss the report if you wanted to. You could receive it and place it on file. You could discuss it. You could request that the developer owner come in and explain any issues that you think require more information. And if you think there's a violation, then it would be subject to enforcement.
Paul, is that helpful?
Yeah, I was just trying to think, you know, like if I don't pay my taxes on time, it accumulates interest and penalties, I think, on a daily basis. And not knowing what the other town regs are like, I was just thinking to myself, well, what happens if I'm the developer? I decide, screw it, I'm not going to do this. You know, come after me. It's more of a pain in the neck for you than it is for me. I just didn't know if there were written consequences to non-compliance, or if it was just a case-by-case basis where the town legal team would have to get involved. But that's fine.
All right. Thank you, Paul. So anything more on the affordability plan, which we were back on page 8, and then on page 9, I think, were we okay with where we ended up on page 9? Yoni, were you satisfied with where we ended up?
Yes.
Great. Page 10 is the updated table 3.1. Does anything need to change here in light of?
I think that it needs to be changed consistent with the chart that was changed some pages ago. In terms of
our two-family.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Mr. Chalder, if messing around with the table is within. I would prefer to have a little bit more time, Mr. Chairman, to make sure I get it right. I believe that what we're talking about here are S's across the board. I'm just going to highlight these and take a closer look at them.
Well, no, but except for when it's in water and sewer, it stays P.
Two-family, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, you're correct. Thank you.
So this may end up just needing one more line, two-family when with public water and sewer and not in a public supply watershed, PPP. When not in a public watershed, S, and when in a public supply watershed, SE.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I will come back to this. I will make this table reflect what the commission did earlier. But I'm not going to attempt it in real time now. As the commission moves on with some of the other items, I will come back and get this table for your further consideration.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chalder. I appreciate, and I too have fear of trying to change tables when everyone is watching over your shoulder. Yep. So let's move on. Beyond that, there weren't other changes though in the table, correct, folks? I don't think there were.
No.
Page 11. Yes, 11. Accessory dwelling units. Yeah, any changes or other things for 11? I think it's all fine. Hearing none, page 12. I think page 12 looks fine. And then the bulk regulations, I think the only change here was that if there's a conflict between this table and 3.4, so page 13, I think is fine. And here, I think you've already deleted, or maybe something was deleted, residential density.
If that is the case, Mr. Chairman, I think because I have turned off, the review pane allows for cross-out text, and I have that currently turned off. If I was to turn that on, this was the line item in the table, which was families per building.
Yep.
And the applicant requested that that line in the table be deleted, and that is what is shown here.
Gotcha. Okay. So that gets us to the end of this document. I want to give Mr. Chalder the time to update the table on page 10. So maybe you can stop sharing.
Do that. I think if it's all right with you, Mr. Chairman, I will listen to your discussion on the POCD so that if there's anything that I need to do there, I can. And then I will go back and make those changes while the commission, I think, is discussing other things.
Sure. And Chris, maybe you let me share the POCD, which we can just do a quick page turn. I mean, unless members of the commission, everyone back to my table, I think everyone felt comfortable with the edits to the plan of conservation and development. And I know we're going to get to, the last thing will be like the final motion. And maybe Mr. Chalder, while you're in there still doing your edits in the Word documents, Attorney Dubuque, did we call these exhibits A and B, and which one was A and which one was B? I'm now forgetting a little.
The draft motion refers to the POCD as Exhibit A because that would be voted on first in the order of things in the motion. And then B would be the regulation.
So if Mr. Chalder just puts a bold, exhibit A at the top of the first page of this one, which I can't do because it's in PDF. And then in the changes to the regulations, he puts a exhibit B at the top. That should keep our record straight. So on the plan of conservation and development, which I think I'm sharing now, we can either go through page by page, the 9 pages, if anyone, or we can just, for efficiency's sake, I think everyone was fine with the updates here, which did, were kind of nicely summarized, kind of this first page, and that sort of summarized the things. Oh, but no, we will have to change a little bit because there is some specific language here on the 2-family dwellings in all residential zoning districts. This language should now reflect with a site plan review, or with, this needs to now have some language to reflect by zoning permit in areas with water and sewer, with site plan review in other areas that are not in public water supply watersheds, and with special exception required in public water supply watersheds. Does that language make sense?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Okay. So that was page 1. We're adding our utilities map in page 2 with a corrected, we do have to actually correct that Route 15 versus Route 1. On page 3, I don't think there are any changes that are required. Page 4. I don't think anything is required here. But at the bottom, no, I don't think we need any changes here on page 4, unless anyone reads that differently. On page 5, that just has small updates to the, I remember we had this discussion, is just updates to the legend to reflect the changes to the text of the POCD. There was a comment of maybe a better map eventually that had, was easier to read. Page 6, I don't think there are anything that needs to be changed or edited there. Page 7, I don't think there's anything that needs to be changed or edited there. There were no changes on page 8. I think that this reflects, on page 8, no 9, here in this table, Mr. Chalder.
Yep.
There'll be similar language that needs to be updated, like the language we are changing in the text.
Yep, I'll make that change as well, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, so that's it for the plan of conservation and development updates, unless I hear any, did we miss anything other than those 2? Alrighty, hearing none. Attorney Dubuque, should I pull up the draft motion, which we can have you walk through while Mr. Chalder is making those sort of final edits?
Yes.
Let me see if I can do that. Okay, did that come up? It may be small, I'll make it bigger. Attorney Dubuque, do you want to walk us through it at a high level, or just entertain sort of if anyone had questions or edits or comments? What's your preference?
I think it's fairly self-explanatory, and it certainly goes through the whole history that you have lived through for the last several months. So unless you need an explanation, it was all based on the documents that were in the record and intended to provide a complete picture so that when you're making your decision, we have everything in one spot rather than have to go back and look through many documents.
Yeah, so Attorney Dubuque, that I did appreciate that, and it does kind of lay out the procedural history and, you know, the order of things, what was asked for, the lengthy sort of process that we went through, and how we held our meetings in open public fashion and accumulated a really substantial record from the applicants, from the folks in town, from Attorney Herbst, who represented 14 citizens and taxpayers of the town, the general public commenters, and the like. So I think it is a good sort of summary of all the things upon which we're basing our decision. Any other reactions, edits, comments from our commission members? Yes, Jeff, go ahead.
Just a couple brief comments. In terms of TPZ expressing no opinion, that's on the historical matters. Is that correct, Marianne? Do I understand that correct? Because you actually do put opinion later in the document. So,
in terms of the introduction, yes, there was a great deal of information in the 145 pages, and I thought it was important to start out by saying that you're making a decision on the actual proposed regulations, both the zoning regulations and the revisions to the Plan of Conservation and Development, and the rest of the information and data you are not expressing any opinions on, nor should you.
understood. And one other point, you say that the property is purportedly owned by 2 Orchard Road. It is owned by 2 Orchard Road, isn't it?
Well, we don't know that. We didn't see a deed or any other evidence of title, so so I didn't feel comfortable saying anything more than purportedly. If you would like to say something more.
It was just a point of curiosity. I thought it was just a little bit odd that we didn't know they actually owned the property.
Well, again, they have represented that they did, but there was no independent investigation or any actual evidence other than the information that was in the application. So I just used that language, but you can use any language you want. This was just intended to capture what went on in the record, but certainly it's all up to you as to what points you want to raise or not raise, or how you want it phrased.
Thank you.
Any other questions or for Attorney Dubuque on the draft motion? So I have a procedural one. When we get to the motion, the actual us making this motion and voting on, I don't have to read all 17 pages, do I, into the record? Or do I?
No, the motion can be made in accordance with the draft that was furnished to you with whatever changes you've made, if you wish to make some changes, and then with exhibits A and B as discussed during this meeting. And that would be fine. And then the document will all be put together, and that will be your official decision.
Yep. There is a blank for the effective date. Is that something we should talk about? Our options there. Are there limits to that?
Well, I'm actually not aware of any limits, but I don't think I've seen effective dates much beyond 90 days. I think that's the most that I've seen. Generally speaking, they reflect in cases where it's it's a very easy change to implement in terms of getting the regulations reprinted and everything put in its right place in your zoning regulations or in your plan of conservation and development. Sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 60 days. In this particular case, there are a number of sections, there are a number of, there's tables, there would be a number of things logistically. And I think we had spoken to Chris the last time about what might be reasonable, and she thought it might take a couple months to put this together. And plus, we also talked about the fact that there may be other issues you would like to examine and perhaps on your own motion make changes, and they could also have the same effective date or an earlier one if you wanted to put it all together. So it was intended to give you, so the effective date that you choose is intended to give you some flexibility. The minimum requirement is enough time to publish in the newspaper. And well, you have to have the date that you're going to, it's going to be effective, published, and you would want the minimum time would be a time for an appeal. So that's why I usually choose something that's a couple of weeks, or I think most common it's 30, 60 days. But here, this is kind of an extraordinary situation. So that's why I mentioned perhaps going with a 90-day period.
Thank you, Attorney Dubuque. Okay, any other questions on the draft proposed motion? Okay.
And just before I just want to mention one other thing, because this is the reflection of your views, please make sure that your views were captured accurately in the information that's listed, especially for your findings and the way that the credibility of witnesses was assessed and so forth. And it's based on things that were said during your deliberations. But
yeah, no,
you need to make a choice.
Sure. No, in that regard, having read it carefully, I do think it reflected both kind of the very stepwise chronology of events. I think you did a good job sort of capturing throughout the public hearing process and then into the deliberation process, all of the types of things that we've talked about these last 6 or 7 months, and did a good job sort of highlighting those key documents, the key testimony from certain witnesses, the sense of the we got from the public and their public comments, and the comments of various state agencies and others who brought in. And on the deliberation side, I think you did capture the types of things that we talked about during the course of our deliberation. So I'm more than satisfied at this does a very nice job summarizing all that we've done over the last 6 months. And I'm not seeing anyone disagreeing with me, so I'll take that as we're all on the same page there. So
how about September 1 as an effective date? Is that enough time, Christine?
The only thing I would mention to you is that if, as Attorney Dubuque had mentioned, that you wanted to make changes and have them effective before or at, I don't know. I guess you might, if you were going to make any other changes on your own, you would have to consider having a meeting in August where you don't normally meet. That's all. Otherwise, September 1st is fine.
How about October then?
October would give you a time frame that you normally do your meetings within, because you normally would be now meeting in July and then in September. So if you came up with something that you wanted to amend the regulations for, you could come up with that and then have a hearing and then adopt it before October. But I leave it to Attorney Dubuque if she said that 90 days is probably an outrider for you in terms of timeframes.
Yeah, Attorney Dubuque, do we want to try to keep it to 90 days as just kind of good practice?
Well, it doesn't have to be exactly 90 days, but I think around that time frame, I would be reluctant to go too much longer than that. But
so, Chris, if we had September 15th as a start date, could we get? And we were doing, if we're interested in a narrow proceeding on improved accessory dwelling unit rules and in essence, allowing this, what we agree upon here tonight, to apply in the mixed use. So there'd be a pretty straightforward changes in hearing. If we had that on the agenda.
Well, the issue that you've got is that your regular meeting in September isn't until the 14th, because you can't meet on Monday the 6th. That's Labor Day. And that's the start of Rosh Hashanah. So you weren't going to be meeting on the 7th. You had pushed your meeting until the following week. The simplest solution is, if the commission members are amenable to it, would be to have a special meeting for a public hearing in August with an adoption date towards, that coincided with the effective date, or I'm sorry, an effective date, if anything, that you might adopt, that coincided with whatever effective date you choose this evening. Because having something on the 15th isn't going to allow you to have the public notice that's required for a decision and posting the, it's just not going to work. So if you're amenable to doing a special meeting in August, it'll work.
Or because we don't have a meeting scheduled.
Correct. So that would mean that in July, you would come up with whatever verbiage you wanted to do. We send it off to the Council of Governments, and then you would have a hearing and go from there.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the September 1, sort of aiming for that as an effective date, or the roughly 90 days, was September 1st, September 7th, sometime in that first week. So I think
I mean, September 7th would be a logical day. In a sense, it gives me a little bit more wiggle room if you make a decision in August to get done what needs to be done.
Okay, September 7th as an effective date. Okay. Mr. Chalder or Attorney Dubuque, what else? What do we need to do? Because I'm sensing it's 9 o'clock and we're close to being done. Do I need a motion? Do we need to see what Mr. Chalder did one more time?
I think it would be a good idea to have Mr. Chalder's changes put up on the screen, just to be sure everybody's on the same page before you entertain the motion, and the next step would just be entertaining the motion.
Great. And if you don't mind, Mr. Chalder, turning off your extra return system. Thank you. And if you could zoom in just a little bit more. So I think you've captured it. Two-family when in a public water supply watershed is special exception. When it is not in a public water supply watershed, there are two paths. One is the permit only path when it's served by public water and public sewer. When it's not served by public water and public sewer, it is the site plan approval. I think that does reflect our consensus. Anyone else have reactions? Nicely done. And then did you want to also show the POCD changes if you got to those?
Mr. Chairman, is there supposed to be an SE for 3.4D multifamily dwellings in A? Is that captured somewhere else?
Mr. Chalder, I think you're muted if you're talking because we can't see you. Or I can see you, but I can't hear you.
I have lost my WebEx icon.
But I can now hear you, so someone must have unmuted you.
Oh, good. Thank you, Chris. I lost my WebEx icon, so I'll do my best. I've gone back, Mr. Chairman, to page 3 in the PDF. And Chris, we had indicated that multifamily dwellings would be a special exception in all of the districts except the public water supply watershed. So now, if I may, Mr. Chairman, moving on to the table. Multifamily dwellings. I think, Mr. Chairman, what I think probably makes sense to do here is add a subline with 2 bullets. Do you agree?
Sure. Although you're changing the B and not the A.
No, I'm getting there.
Oh, sorry.
A multifamily dwelling in a public water supply watershed, and there is none in the B zone, so that actually does come out. There you go. So that just clarifies. Multifamily dwellings in a public water supply watershed are not permitted. That circumstance only exists in the A zone. The B zone does not have any public water supply watershed in it. If you're not in a public water supply watershed, then again, it's a special permit, and these need to come down.
If you could move that red bubble a little to the left in the upper group.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Apologize, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So is this, thank you, Chris, for that catch, which I think was just unintentional. I think this does help clarify multifamily dwellings. In accordance with 3.4, meaning they have to be public water, public sewer. That's that cross-reference to 3.4. When they're in the public, when they're not in a public water supply watershed, all of these residential zones, it is through special exception, and there currently are no places where there's water and sewer in a public water supply watershed. Okay. I think that's clear enough for me. How's everyone else doing?
Fine.
Fine. And if you could, did you add Exhibit A all the way to the first page of this? I don't remember seeing it.
Yeah, bear with me for a moment, Mr. Chairman. I did not hear, so just give me a second. I'll make that change as well.
Is this Exhibit A or Exhibit B, Attorney Dubuque?
This is Exhibit B. I already made it to the other page.
Okay. Great.
So I think that, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I realize it's going to be small, but I just wanted to go through a quick print preview with the commission here. That's probably not a great page by page. So based on the draft beforehand, the changes that have been made here this evening, none on page 1 or 2. On page, excuse me, apologize. And find an appropriate. On page 3, we made the changes with regard to site plan approval for 2-family uses. We made the change. I'm not sure what's going on with this blank space here, Mr. Chairman, but there's on the print preview. We made the change, got rid of the alternate considerations here. I don't believe we made any other changes until back to page 10, where we updated for the discussion with regard to 2 families and clarified the multifamily dwelling section. And now again, this shows the deletion of the families per building. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and go to the POCD screen, if that's okay.
I think that's fine.
Where did it go? So I apologize for scrolling quickly. Here on the POCD page, I've added Exhibit A. Given the commission's discussion about 2-family, I reworded the order here and put sub-bullets in. So 2-family is a special exception in a public water supply watershed, site plan approval when not served by public water, public sewer, and zoning permit when served by public water and public sewer.
Great. I think that reflects our discussion. Thank you. And I think there was one other place.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, at the very end, I copied that text and inserted it here. This is the action agenda. So this highlighted text here is the copy from the first page, the changes that were made.
Great. Any questions from commission members on those changes to the, or updates and edits to reflect our conversation tonight in the POCD document? Okay, we've gone through both of them. I guess you can, thank you. You can stop sharing. And we've gone through our draft motion. So I will move the draft motion as discussed and presented, and along with that motion, exhibits A, which are the modifications, the reasonable modifications to the plan of conservation and development, and exhibit B, the reasonable modifications to our zoning regulations. So the draft motion has been moved. Do I have a second? Second by Larry. I guess we're now open to any further discussion on the motion with exhibits A and B that has been moved and seconded. So I'm hearing none. Should we go to a vote? All in favor of the motion that reflects our changes and modifications and additions from tonight and reasonable compromises I think we've made, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
So that's 5 yeses. Any noes? 1 no, and no abstentions. So the motion passes. Thank you all. And well, first, thank you, Mr. Chalder, Attorney Dubuque. You've been a tremendous resource to us this entire process. It is sincerely appreciated. It shows with the quality of work and really helped us stay on task, stay focused, and it's much appreciated. And to my fellow commission members, I really do appreciate all of you and the seriousness with which you took this task that was presented to us, your collegiality, the humor, which was occasionally needed to keep us sane through these last 6 or 7 months, and the real respectful way with which you approached this significant step forward for our town. So it's much appreciated across the board. Thank you all.
Mr. Chairman, can you just tell me who voted no?
Just Paul.
Because I didn't see or hear. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Anyone else have anything other than let's get the rest of our agenda done and we can then go? Actually, Attorney Dubuque, was there anything else you need done before we let you and Mr. Chalder go?
No, I think it's a fine job this evening.
Thank you all. I'm as usual at this hour, I usually can't find my agenda anymore. Do we have anything else?
So number
Do we have to vote on the Amity permit extension?
Yeah, we did that.
Oh, we voted. Oh my
2
God.
years ago.
Sorry.
There is no report from the Regional Planning Committee because I didn't bring the minutes. I might not have received the minutes I didn't bring the agenda from May's meeting. I apologize. So no report.
That's totally fine. Anything else on the agenda, Chris?
I just want to note that the commission did receive a copy of the formal submission for the cell tower on 118 Newton Road. There is no action that you take, but it is here. So if anybody chooses to look at it, the town hall is open. You're welcome to come in and look at it.
And I'm just guessing that's a pretty large document.
Over an inch. Yeah.
Yeah. Did they give an electronic one or no?
No.
Can we ask for them to give one?
I can ask if there is one.
Yeah, there should be. It should be all filed with the Siting Council electronically, but it'd be nice if they gave it to you so it could be more easily accessed.
If I can get it, I will distribute it to you.
Appreciate it.
It's not anything we have any say in at all,
Zero.
right?
Nope.
Nothing. But it'd be easier for more people to see it if it was actually electronic. Anything else?
I spared you minutes for tonight.
Appreciate it. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, Mr. Schatz, yes.
I just want to make a couple of comments. And again, Rob, I do want to thank you. You really stewarded this amazingly well. I was proud to be part of this group and the very respect. This is how a regulation should be crafted. I continue to believe all along, and you've mentioned it many times, Rob, that the applicants were almost urged to come and compromise and arrive at a point where we may not agree on issues, but that we can come to some common ground to get what was thoughtful and constructive discussion done with respectful debate and an attempt at consensus. And I don't know why, but that wasn't possible. I was also troubled when the applicant said, you know, this is only our first step. It's not our last or our only step. And what I was most proud of in the discussion amongst everybody on the commission, not once did we bring up race, whether you're Caucasian or African American or Hispanic or Asian. It never came up. And that was the premise of basically their application, was that the town currently is and has always been based on race and exclusionary practices. And not only could not we find it in law, it's never been part of any minutes of this commission or any commission I've been part of. So, you know, part of that is that the people around here looked at the application on its merits and what is good and bad for the town. So I really applaud everybody who's been involved, and especially the public for coming out. We don't have to agree, and it's good that there is disagreement and discussion, and it never gets personal, and there's never name calling among the commission. But we had good, passionate discussion from the public, especially the younger folks, which I think that's probably the most important thing, is that young folks get passionate about issues, and hopefully in the future people can leave race out of this. And that's really just gnawed at me and bothered me the whole time, that somehow our zoning code was intentionally racist, or this group was racist. So even though I didn't vote for the motion, clearly, at least no one's ever told me this, it has nothing to do with race, the color of your skin, or your religion, or anything else. So once again, I thank you guys all. And Rob, I'm certainly proud to sit beside you on a commission anytime.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. And do, again, appreciate all the time and effort that folks committed to this. But I'm tired and hungry. I'll take that motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. No opposed. Thank you all. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for everything.
Good night. Go eat.
Good night.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Marianne.